So yeah,
I think the only way that makes sense is God's got to be outside of time. It's just another proof that he's outside of time.
He has to be, otherwise time would be above God, and then time would be God. Like, and that doesn't.
Well, he'd be limited. He'd be limited, and he's not.
He'd be limited. He'd be created. He'd be within time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's no way that's possible. So for something to be true and not true at the same time can only be the case for God, because he's outside of time.
When he spoke existence, I think he spoke all of it all at once. All of it. Every single bit of it. Past, present, future.
Right.
I don't think he spoke initial creation and then he like backed off and just let things happen the way.
That's a cool way of looking at it. I never thought of it.
I think he just literally just spoke all of it, including time, because he had to have created time. Time wasn't a pre-existent thing. Because before the beginning, in the beginning, God was already existing. And even saying already existing, it shows the limits of our language, because that's not exactly right. It's he literally is I am. Like he literally is. Like it's not even he was. It's
our language is three-dimensional. The same way
exactly.
You know what I mean? The same way 2D, the same way flatlanders would have a hard inability to describe the third dimension, even if they experienced it, even if they were taken up into the third dimension, right? They still wouldn't be able to describe with their two-dimensional words. And that's what we're trying to do. That's literally what we're trying to do.
I like that, Ben. 3D language.
That's great.
That was good, man.
Nice. I got one.
As my friend Ben would say.
It's interesting because you just hit on something I think's curious, and let me know what you think. When God created, right? God outside of dimensions. You said earlier you think there was 12. We don't have to get into that because there's reasons for that. Okay. But that means that all of the dimensions, all of the realms, all of these layers were created at a certain point. Okay. In time.
Yeah.
Probably all dimensions are to some degree affected by time. At least we know they all had a beginning.
Yeah.
The only thing that did not have a beginning is God himself, right?
That's right.
He is. So we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, right? There's one dimension is just a dot, right? Just a dot. There's no left, there's no right, there's no up, there's no down, no line, no nothing. That's impossible for us to conceive because we're stuck here in the third. Two dimensions is left, right, I guess forward, back, but no up and down, right? But the second dimension is built from a bunch of one dimensions.
Yep, absolutely. You cannot have a second dimension without the first. And you can't have three-dimensional world without the second.
Exactly. Similarly, the third dimension is two-dimensional, stacked into the up and down. So you take two-dimension flat, put them on top of each other, and you get volume. You get up and down. I wonder if the fourth dimension or fifth dimension, wherever our souls are, is us, the third dimension, stacked.
That's the version of the multiverse that I actually believe in. So,
nice.
Did you guys just become best friends? Did we just become best friends?
No, I think you're absolutely right. For there to be a fourth dimension, it would have to be created. It would have to comprise of three-dimensional slices. Now, I'll qualify that by saying I don't believe there's other three-dimensional universes where there's consciousness and there's other beings and there's different versions of me and you. Don't believe that at all. Now I will say there could be. There's nothing in the Bible that says that there can't be. But if there was a multiverse like that, like the classic, it's called the many worlds interpretation, but what most people think of the multiverse, like, when I was a kid, it was the show Sliders. Now it's like Marvel movies and stuff.
Right. I would call these timelines.
Yeah, okay. They're like timelines. So they would say that that's like a multiverse where there's every decision that you make is it creates a branch timeline.
Branches off. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't believe that.
I don't either. I have no reason to believe that. But I'm also not going to totally discount it because there's nothing in the Bible that says that it's not that. All it would mean is those other versions of you aren't really you. They're different. They may be, even right down to your DNA, they might be the same as you in bodily form,
Yeah.
but they would have a different soul and spirit. They would be they have
Right.
free will, right?
Right.
That's the whole point. They have free will, so they can make different choices and create these new branch timelines. Well, some of them might reject Christ. That doesn't mean you're going to hell, you know?
Yeah,
That means they are.
exactly.
So
and
all
it says the
yeah.
Bible says it's appointed for man to die once and once be judged.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So they would not be
So-
you. Like they might
Right.
be you biologically, but we know that that's not us. Like my biological body is not the 100% version of what I am. There's more in there that's me. This is just like
Dude,
when you
it's
buy
not-
a car and drive a car around town. The car isn't you. That's a
Right.
vehicle.
It's not even that. Like God created
Yeah.
this timeline.
Yeah.
It took his action to do so. Our decisions are not something that creates.
Exactly.
Our decisions
That's
are not
right.
a mechanism of creation.
Yeah,
God
and
God
that-
does that.
It's a great way of explaining it. And yeah, so I have no reason to believe that version, the many worlds version of the multiverse is true.
Okay.
Now, what I would say is
yeah.
I am open to the idea, and this isn't ever talked about, but a version of and I'll try to go through it briefly, but the version of the multiverse that says, well, for there to be a 3-dimensional world, it's made of 2-dimensional slices that we can actually measure by the Planck length. Like we can measure those; they exist. And for a 2-dimension, but that doesn't mean that the 2-dimensional universes have any consciousness or beings. They don't. We would see them. They don't.
Mm.
So for those 2-dimensional slices to exist, there have to be 1-dimensional lines lined up. And for those lines to exist, there have to be points. So it just stands to reason for there to be a 4th dimension, there would have to be extra 3-dimensional universes. But again, I'll preface it by saying there's no reason to believe that those are inhabited, because none of the 2-dimensional universes are inhabited. I mean, we would see little floating like flatlanders all around if that were the case. There would be some way of determining that, but there's not. We're made up of these 2-dimensional slices of our 3D world. So what if our universe is one slice of a 4-dimensional space, and the only way that we can really think of it is like stacked on top. It's not really that,
Right,
but
right.
that's the best we can do. So, you have these 3-dimensional universes, in a sense, stacked on top of each other to create the 4D world, and then so on and so far, so forth, up to possibly the 12th, maybe more, maybe less, who knows. But that doesn't mean that any of those would have to be inhabited. Now, there are 4-dimensional beings, just like there's 3-dimensional beings. I don't believe there's 2-dimensional beings because there's just no evidence for it. I think we're probably the lowest in that regard.
Yeah, the
But
lowest.
that
We're the
doesn't
lowest.
mean-
We're the lowest form of consciousness. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. So, but that doesn't mean that those other building blocks don't exist. They
Right.
most likely
Right.
most likely do.
I mean, like we just said, higher dimensions are built of lower dimensions.
Yeah.
That's how the physics works. That's
Yep.
the science. Okay, that's how it works. So that means that that the dimensions interact with and have effects on one another. If the 3rd dimension has an effect on the 2nd, do you think the 2nd dimension's like, hey, we can explain this effect perfectly because we understand the 3rd dimension and we know and realize what's going on? No, they come up with the term like dark, I don't know,
Yeah.
dark
yeah,
energy.
Yeah.
They would come up
say
with
the
a
same thing.
term for whatever they're experiencing that they can't explain. They come up with the term for it and they just move on, as if that's okay. But we know that the dimensions interact with one another. And for me, it's being that God is the only thing outside of dimensions, and he created the entire structure and the infrastructure, right? And the mechanics of all of these things working. To me, it's like God's the only one that's not affected by those things.
That's right.
But he is the one that can be sovereign over all of those things.
Absolutely correct.
Because he's not only sovereign over the 3rd dimension and our human experience consciousness, he's also sovereign over the angelic dimension and over their experience and over everything that they're doing, right? And all of it was to bring Jesus about and to glorify Jesus and his grace and his justice and his judgment and to expose who God truly is through Christ, through Jesus.